The issues for every survivor are that they are managing risk, and every survivor knows best what their risk points are or are not. I think when you're working with a survivor who is an immigrant, sometimes that poses an issue for the advocate because the advocate may not realize what are the most common risks or the risk for that immigrant survivor. So it's always a question of just paying attention to the person in front of you and listening to them when they tell you this is what's a risk for me and this is what's not. It's so tempting in this field when someone presents saying I have been sexually assaulted to think that the sexual assault and the ramifications of that are their greatest risk in life. But the truth is someone's greatest risk might be that they would get deported, or their greatest risk might be financial stability for their family back home in another country. You just don't know. So I think when you're working with an immigrant, being open to listening to what are the things that they care about and that matter to them, even if it sounds initially as if it's unrelated to the violence that brought them to you in the first place. And then being aware of giving people permission to share information with you, giving people permission to make decisions, and emphasizing, I think this is an area where it's extraordinarily important to be clear with people about what you do or do not share without their permission, because if someone's undocumented as an immigrant, they may be living in the shadows, and that means everything is risky for them. Everything they do could bring them to the attention of authorities who could decide to have them deported. So the mandatory reporting issue for an undocumented immigrant, it's not that Adult Protective Services is necessarily dangerous to them in the way it would respond to the violence, but bringing them to the attention of government may pose harm to that person. And I think that puts a responsibility on advocates before you're meeting with an individual immigrant client to know what happens in your community. Does your APS have a policy or a position on whether they share information about immigration status or whether they even ask for information about immigration status? Do they forward that information to federal immigration authorities, or do they have a specific policy of saying, we know that that's dangerous for you. Addressing violence in our community is more important, so we will not share that information, or even better, we will not ask for it. And if they don't have such a policy, that's an opportunity for advocates to advocate for them to have a policy.